October 1944. The rain in Italy was a relentless cold enemy. Inside a mud-choked foxhole, Sergeant Frank Miller was facing a crisis more immediate than the German counterattack starting 50 yards away. His .50 caliber machine gun was spitting fire, but his gunner was down and the last can of ammunition was sealed shut. This was the silent killer of the Allied advance: paper. Every can of fresh .50 cal ammo was sealed with a sticky, paper-thin tape. When that tape got wet or covered in mud, it turned into concrete. Frank's shaking, mud-slicked hands fumbled with a knife, desperately trying to tear the seal open so his men could keep fighting. The delay, just 15 critical seconds, felt like an eternity. That night, countless American lives were lost not to enemy bullets, but to the impossibility of opening a damn ammunition box. Now look at this image. This is Vesta Stoudt, a mother of 2 boys serving overseas, working at an ordnance factory far from the front lines. Vesta heard the stories and saw the problem firsthand. She knew that the official solution was killing American soldiers. You are about to discover how one factory worker, with no military training, changed the course of World War II, why her single invention was immediately prioritized over entire weapons systems, and the 3 desperate field repairs that proved the smallest item can be the greatest weapon. This is the true story of how one woman's simple idea revolutionized the modern battlefield. Vesta Stoudt wasn't a general or a designer. She was a packing plant worker in Illinois. Her job was to seal the ammo boxes. She knew the standard paper tape was failing. In January 1943, she watched a box full burst open and realized that if the paper seal was so fragile, it was useless against rain and mud. If the seal survived, the soldiers couldn't tear it open fast enough. It was a no-win situation. The proper protocol was to file a complaint with her immediate supervisor, who would then file a report which might eventually reach the War Department in 2 years. Vesta knew her sons, and men like Sergeant Miller didn't have 2 years. So Vesta broke protocol. She wrote a letter directly to the Commander-in-Chief. On February 10, 1943, Vesta wrote to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. She didn't mince words. She described the problem, stating that the troops were struggling unnecessarily and that a strong waterproof cloth-backed tape, a tape that could be torn by hand, was needed immediately. The audacity of the letter was staggering. Most such letters would be instantly thrown out by White House staff, but Vesta's letter didn't stop there. She included the heart-wrenching context. Her own sons were overseas, and she knew this small failure could cost them their lives. The letter landed on the desk of General George R. Spaulding, head of the Army Ordnance Department. His initial reaction was probably skepticism, another armchair inventor trying to solve a military problem. But the emotional weight of a mother appealing directly to the president, combined with the clear, simple logic of her solution, was impossible to dismiss. Roosevelt saw the logic instantly. He wrote 2 words on the letter and sent it to the War Production Board. Act on this. The challenge was immediately handed to Johnson & Johnson, specifically their Permacell division. The requirements were seemingly impossible. The tape had to be incredibly strong to hold heavy metal cans, completely waterproof to resist trenches and amphibious landings, tear easily across its width for speed, and be non-reflective in the field to avoid giving away positions. The design team faced extreme constraints. The adhesive had to remain sticky in the sweltering heat of the Pacific and functional in the sub-zero cold of the Ardennes. They settled on a rubber-based adhesive applied to a dark, thick fabric backing, a cotton duck cloth. They called it the duck tape, due to its waterproof qualities and the duck cloth material. It was dyed olive drab, and it was, against all the odds, perfect. By the summer of 1943, Vesta's simple idea was being rolled out across the European and Pacific theaters. The battlefield was about to change. The first revolution was in the air. High above German territory, a P-51 Mustang could suffer catastrophic damage from a single flak burst. On one mission over the Ruhr Valley, Captain Easy Jones watched a shell fragment tear a 3-foot gash in his wing near the fuel line and vital control surfaces. Standard procedure? Bail out or crash land. But Jones knew bailing out meant capture. His ground crew had packed something extra in his survival kit: Vesta's tape. Jones fought the thin air and G-forces. The damaged wing buffeted violently, threatening to rip itself apart. Against all odds, he wrestled his P-51 into a brief, stable glide. Reaching out with a shaking, gloved hand, he began the impossible repair. This wasn't about aesthetics, it was about aerodynamics. He painstakingly layered the tape over the jagged tear, sealing the fuel line and using the tape's tensile strength to smooth the airflow across the control surface. The tape held. That single impossible field repair stabilized the P-51. Jones flew 400 miles back to base, proving that Vesta's tape was rugged enough to survive the high-speed, high-altitude hell of aerial combat. His after-action report noted the tape saved his life, transforming his plane from a wreck into a functioning vehicle. The second revolution was on the ground, where speed means survival. In the hedgerows of Normandy, a reconnaissance jeep hit a mine, blowing out the radiator and shattering the distributor cap. Under fire, the driver, Corporal Smith, was stranded. A real repair would take hours and specialized parts, likely requiring a dangerous recovery mission. Smith pulled out his roll of tape. First, he used it to patch the radiator hoses, twisting the tape tightly to slow the leak enough to run the engine for short bursts. Then, the real genius, the shattered ceramic distributor cap. He carefully aligned the broken pieces, creating an electrical contact nightmare. But he wrapped the entire cap tightly in multiple layers of the tape, creating a seal that insulated the wiring and restored the structural integrity enough to hold the spark. It was a temporary fix, crude and ugly. It should have failed within minutes. But Corporal Smith drove that patched jeep for 12 miles, carrying vital intelligence back to the main unit, escaping an ambush that would have certainly killed him. That single taped distributor cap lasted for 4 days, until Smith could get a permanent replacement. The duct tape turned a disabled vehicle into a working asset capable of extended service. The final, most critical revolution was in survival medicine. Combat medics often ran out of supplies or faced injuries too large for their small bags. The consequences of not having a quick tourniquet or splint in the field were often amputation or death. On the island of Peleliu, a soldier suffered a severe wound to his thigh, severing an artery. The medic had used his last conventional tourniquet. The only thing left in his bag that had the strength and adhesion needed was the tape. He wrapped a clean bandage pad over the wound, and then used the tough cloth-back tape to create an improvised wide-strap tourniquet above the wound. Unlike thin ropes or flimsy belts, the wide tape provided the robust, even compression needed to completely stop the arterial bleeding without tearing the skin. But it didn't stop there. Medics used it to secure splints for broken limbs, to patch rips in tents and clothing, and to keep bandages waterproof during evacuation. It was ugly, unorthodox, and absolutely essential. That soldier survived because Vesta's tape served as an emergency bandage, a splint binder, and a life-saving compression device. It became the medic's hidden weapon, a fast, sterile, and strong fix for problems they hadn't even conceived of in training. The war ended, but the tape's revolution was just beginning. By the time the German surrender was signed, the military's demand for the tape was astronomical. The secret, the logistical nightmare solved. The tape fundamentally changed military logistics. Suddenly, equipment failure was not a mission-ending event, but a minor delay. This single invention is estimated to have saved the U.S. military tens of thousands of repair man-hours and millions of dollars in material replacement. It was cheaper, faster, and more versatile than carrying hundreds of specialized repair parts. More importantly, it meant fewer vehicles and men were immobilized in the field, waiting for non-critical repairs, maintaining operational tempo. The motto became, if it moves and shouldn't, use the gray tape. If it doesn't move and should, use the oil. The tape's success spawned an entire culture within the U.S. military, the culture of field expediency. It wasn't about following the manual, it was about maintaining the fight. The duct tape was the icon of American improvisation, the idea that no problem was too big to solve with what you had on hand. As the war ended, the tape switched colors, from olive drab to silver, for use on ventilation ducts, earning its lasting name, duct tape. But its true legacy lives on in every conflict and every industry since. It went to space with the Apollo 13 crew, helping to fashion a life-saving filter system when disaster struck 200,000 miles from Earth. Astronauts carried it, pilots carried it, and soldiers carried it. It is still standard issue in every field kit, every tank, and every naval vessel. Vesta Stoudt never sought fame or fortune. After her invention saved countless lives, She continued to work in the factory until she retired. She never profited from the invention. She simply returned to her life, knowing she had done her part. Her ultimate reward was the knowledge that her simple letter, fueled by a mother's conviction, had saved the sons of countless other mothers. The military is rigid and hierarchical. Innovation is expected to come from generals or engineers with advanced degrees. Vesta Stoudt was just a mother working on a factory floor. She broke the chain of command because she saw a problem others had accepted as fate. She wasn't aiming for revolution, she was aiming for survival. Her courage, not the courage to fight but the courage to challenge a flawed system, is what revolutionized the battlefield. Vesta Stout's letter, powered by a mother's conviction, proved that the most valuable invention in war is often the simplest one. The legacy of Vesta Stoudt and her invention is a profound reminder that the greatest military advantage is often born from necessity and the genius of those brave enough to question the status quo.